Well, a burning car is not fun. A day later, it starts like fire up again. Gasoline, I mean, if you spill it, you can destroy water tables with it. If the seat is on fire, that doesn't matter if there's a seat of an electric vehicle on fire or a seat of a gasoline engine. That's at one point I was thinking of buying a hybrid, so I better not. But if you think about it, you're driving around in a big Molotov cocktail. That's what you have. Put it in a junkyard, and then a week later, suddenly the whole junkyard is on fire. Yeah. That's not really good. Fundamentally, actually, on a philosophical level, it's actually the same because you have electrons moving from one compound to another because it's a redox reaction of the gasoline with the oxygen in the air.
Before we get into this, I need to make something very clear. This is not about dismissing risk. Any fire is dangerous. Any vehicle fire is dangerous. Any battery fire is dangerous. This is not about dismissing risk. This is about understanding it properly. And one person hurt, no matter what the cause, is one person too many. So this is an important topic. And I happen to have a friend, Matthias Berenstiel. He's a chemistry professor and a volunteer firefighter. And I've invited him in for a discussion on EVs, gas vehicles, and fires. I thought that I would get a bit of a perspective on this outside of the EV sphere. One thing I'll ask, just for clarification, you don't own an EV at this point.
No, I don't.
You just have a regular old car.
Yeah.
So there's no agenda here.
I was thinking about buying one.
Yeah. So maybe what I'll do is I'll start the discussion, because we briefly talked about this yesterday, and that's why I've invited you in to sort of discuss this on camera. The difference between the frequency of fires from regular internal combustion cars and electric vehicles, there's a significant difference in the occurrence of fires in both camps. If you look at it on a per 100,000 car basis, you have about 1,500 car fires per 100,000 vehicles on the gasoline side, and you've got about 25, 28, something like that, per 100,000 vehicles on the electric side. So my first question to you yesterday, in talking about this, was, and maybe better is not the right word, because none of them are better, but in terms of attending to a volume of, say, 1,500 car fires versus a volume of let's say, 25 electric vehicle fires, which one's better? What are the differences? Like, what the context, as we discussed, the context matters.
Yes.
Yeah. So,
well, a burning car is not fun. I mean, you have to take it out and extinguish the fire. That's what we're trained to. I've never been personally in an EV fire yet, so I don't have that experience. Again, that's the low rate of how many EVs are around. Maybe also the lower rate of actually fire. But what we've been trained for is the gas or diesel fires. Just extinguishing that with standard operating procedures, and then also dealing with electric fires. And the major difference is basically when you have an electric fire, when the battery goes, it goes. You have to basically babysit until it burns itself out. And experience showed with firefighters, other fire departments, and testing that you basically need 10 times the volume of water to extinguish a electric vehicle fire compared to gasoline-powered fire.
Yeah. So, and again, to be completely fair, I mean, the frequency is less, but the intensity, or at least what seems to me to be the intensity showed online, tends to be, pretty reactive with battery fires. And if you look at the total number of gasoline fires, it's probably also fair to say that there's a range there of, say, not so intense situations versus full-on infernos. Yeah. And I guess that's where the question is. Like, if you've got a significant volume of fire, where some are more easy to handle, versus the electric fires, which look like they're probably going to be, as you said, you need to babysit them more. It takes a little more time to sort of address them. What are some of the differences in putting out an electric fire and attending to it to make sure that it is fully extinguished versus a gasoline fire? You've done some training on this, so
yeah. And well, so what you do is basically water. Water is really good. It it lowers the temperature. It takes away one of the corners of the fire triangle, and that's how you control it. And you basically kind of put water on there. You can use foam that helps as well. And yeah, that's basically the fire. And you have to be careful because you have residual gasoline in there. It can explode. So you always approach to on a 45-degree angle. It's really interesting. What you also see, and actually I've seen it myself. Magnesium is used for steering wheels and whatnot, and it actually starts popping because it's almost like a battery. Really, it's not. It's a structural element, but it reacts then with oxygen, and you really see that. And if little pops is fine, but can go and can really explode, and shrapnel can come around. For electric batteries, it's like once one cell goes, that's basically it. It's kind of this chain reaction, the next cell's in the next cell, and you really can't really do much. It's this internal chemical reaction, and that's basically it. And I think that's where the problem lies. Once it's going, then it's going. Now, the battery technology is getting better and better. They're more compartmentalized. We've been told. Other stuff was the first concern. Once you have electricity, what happens if you hit it with water? Are you kind of electroshocking yourself and kind of getting in danger with firefighters? That is not the case. So with electric vehicle, you're fine. You can kind of spray water on it and you're fine. Some manufacturers have like a shut off, and you can kind of pull some plugs or cut certain cables to kind of bypass that. But pretty much that's basically it. So yeah, you have to be very, very careful about that. With again comparison with a gasoline fire, you can still have gasoline in the gas tank as long as there's no spark around and lower temperature, then it's fine. But yeah, and you can get there. But you don't, and I think this is the difference. You don't have to let the whole gas tank, the whatever gasoline gas tank, burn up until everything is done. You can kind of extinguish it before that. And whereas with batteries, it usually goes. And then even if you get it there, like if you extinguish it, you have to be really careful because it has been shown, all around when then tow companies took an EV, put it on their junkyard, and a day later it starts like fire up again because there was some residual stuff. Yeah. They're taking care of that now. They're just basically putting it aside or even into sea can containers immersed in water.
Yeah, you mentioned that the other day that the process in Europe is a little more, maybe I'll use the word refined or advanced in that they have a sea can. They basically immerse the vehicle and then they leave it until it's
a couple of days. Soak it in order to kind of deactivate the chemical reaction, basically. Because you don't want, and that's how it was found out. You had some engines. You put it in a junkyard, and then a week later, suddenly the whole junkyard is on fire. Yeah. That's not really good. Yeah. So you just have to be kind of mindful of that.
Yeah. So I mean, it is a different vehicle, different technology, and the education part of it, I think, is important here. So from a fire department point of view, like you mentioned that you've done training, you've actually done training with, I guess, more predominantly, ICE vehicles, gasoline-powered vehicles, but you've also done some training in the case that you needed to attend an electric vehicle fire. What can you tell us about the training you received, or the present state of where fire departments are in their understanding of handling an electric vehicle?
Well, it's basically, you find out, people like fire departments all around, Canada, US, Europe, they come across incidents and they learn from those incidents. Usually it's through bad experiences. And now you have more electric vehicles, so people start learning. Underwriter labs is from insurance purposes. They do testing, kind of how can we do it? What can we do better? Yeah. So there's a lot of standards on that, which is really good, and that kind of goes into the kind of the thoughts in order to be safe. That's,
Yeah.
kind of for everyone involved, for the drivers, for firefighters and emergency personnel, and really environment.
Yeah. One of the stats that I ran across just in my own research preparing for this was the number of incidents of fires in hybrids. I don't hear anything about hybrid fires, but yet hybrid fires occur at almost twice the amount of gasoline car fires. So we've got 25, 28 fires in EVs. We've got 1,500 in gasoline cars, but over 3,000 in hybrid cars. And something that I guess I felt myself is that, not in questioning hybrid technology. I think it's an interesting technology, but you are doubling the complexity.
Yep.
And you're also putting all of the bad parts of an internal combustion together with all of the bad parts of.
At one point, I was thinking of buying a hybrid, so I better not.
Well, and there's a thing from a social understanding point of view, and what propagated this episode for this channel was a fire that happened. Well, two fires that happened last week, and I was struck by the comments online. There were two fires in our local community, and if you following Facebook, the comments were, I wouldn't own an EV. They're death traps, fireballs, accidents waiting to happen. And neither of those fires were, in fact, electric vehicles. They were both traditional gas fires. So the perception plays into this as well. There was no comment there that said I wouldn't buy a hybrid or I wouldn't buy a gas car. The automatic assumption was that, well, if it's on fire, it must be an electric car.
Yeah.
When statistically, that's really not the case. But statistics and the real world are two different things.
First, I wasn't personally attending any of those fires, so I can't really comment on those cases there. I've seen like clips on the internet and all that. The fires are different. Like there's obviously once the fire starts, then if the seat is on fire, that doesn't matter if there's a seat of an electric vehicle on fire or a seat of a gasoline engine. That's once the interior burns, it burns. There's plastic. Then you have the normal fire there. But depending on what goes first is really different. And yeah, I think there's usually a fear. There's a fear of new phobia, new things that you don't want that. But also we are so used to kind of gasoline engines for now, 100 years or, our lifetimes, it's just normal. But if you think about it, you're driving around in a big Molotov cocktail. That's basically it, let's have my gasoline in there. If you're born with it, you have ignition source, boom, that's what you have. That's just what it is.
Yeah. I think one of the comments you had the other day, which I thought was interesting, is, gasoline is designed to burn. Batteries are designed not to burn. Well, but the fundamental design of the vehicle is predicated on explosions.
Yes.
Versus
controlled explosion inside the engine block. Yes, and that pushes the piston. That's the internal combustion engine.
100%.
And obviously we have electrons. You can even say fundamentally, actually, on a philosophical level, it's actually the same because you have electrons moving from one compound to another because it's a redox reaction of the gasoline with the oxygen in the air. And I think that's where the problem lies because in a battery, you have, some sorts of stored electrons. Well, lithium plus charges, and that electrons, that can also react with oxygen. And it's kind of interacting with that.
Yeah.
And that's where the danger is. That's why you need to have the batteries built in such a way that they're, laminated and layer upon layer in plastic or aluminum or whatever other casing to protect. The worst thing you can do is, take some pokey thing and kind of puncture your battery of your laptop or puncture the battery of whatever, because then you have these side reactions with air that you don't want. And those are really violent because you have a lot of stored potential chemical electricity in there, energy.
Yeah. It's interesting. It's actually kind of the same reaction, just in a different, controlled way.
Kind of. A battery or accumulator is like you push electrons from one side to another, but it's all about electrons. It's all about electrons.
It's all about electrons. And the other social anomaly here that I find is that literally we're all walking around with the exact same technology in our pockets. So where we're afraid of electric vehicles, we have no compunction with taking a cell phone with a lithium-ion battery and dropping it in our pocket and being perfectly content that that's not going to blow up.
But we have house fires because of that.
Oh, we do.
Because the charging and all this, like
Yep.
the charging, something went wrong with the laptop charging, something went wrong with phone charging.
People putting their phones under their pillows, the heat builds
The
up.
heat builds up. Something happens at the adapter when you whatever the box you put into the outlet. There's a lot of intrinsic danger there.
Yeah.
And obviously you want to reduce that. There's a lot of smart technology, kind of if it's full, then it stops or, kind of gets slower. But that's what you need to do. So
Yeah, yeah. From a social aspect, I think is where I think this is the interesting phenomenon because by and large, the public perception is that somehow these electric vehicles are inherently unsafe and they represent an overly large percentage of catastrophic fires that are currently happening in cars. And statistically, I mean, from my own point of view, just looking at the research, I think anyone can replicate that pretty easily. It's well published. Numerically, they're not. They don't represent a significant amount of, or I should say, numerically, they don't represent an overly large portion of the fires that happen. Yet the perception is that they do represent a dangerous.
Well, usually early models of any new technology has usually more troubles, and because you haven't really, field tested it, so you have to be careful about that. You get used to regular technology, and you're just taking that intrinsic, like your lawnmower and whatnot. Kind of, you don't smoke around. It is just like makes sense, but it's just there. Gasoline. I mean, if you spill it, you can destroy water tables with it. Like there's a lot of environmental stuff that you wouldn't really have with kind of a battery unless there's leaking, depending on what stuff is in there. You always have to put a little asterisk on that. To kind of the devil is always in the detail. Yeah. We don't really look into that. I mean, we've been talking quite a bit about changing of technology. We're just getting so used to it, and then because of features of technology, back in the day, a TV was this big box, so you build your living room around the TV. It goes into a corner, or it has to be there.
Or you've got a special room, the TV room.
The TV room,
which became the computer room.
Yes, exactly, exactly. And now with modern technology of flat screen TV, LEDs, and whatnot, it's a picture. It's a screen. It's a screen, but it's like a picture. You just hang it wherever you want, and you don't have this. But if you're used to the 1950s and 60s, that it's this three-dimensional, fairly big box. If you had that, you need to plan your life around that. And so the same with cars. We plan our life around when do you gas up, what do you do,
and the pattern becomes familiar. It becomes accepted.
Like one person online kind of commented about it, but like we're getting so used to it. So everyone says like, oh well, gas stations and whatnot. But he said like, imagine the technology would be flipped. You had already EV vehicles, and now there's this new technology of gasoline-powered engines. And he says like, I can charge my car at home. Why would I drive to this installation, which we call gas station, that's somewhere? Sometimes in urban areas, you find it fairly frequently. If you're up north, you have like one gas station or two, and they're only open until 9 o'clock. You would say like, why would you want that technology? But for us, it's so used to that. Of course, I get out of my way to go to the special place to put liquid into my car, and
and you get to do that every week or every
week,
9 days,
exactly.
Days,
whatever you do, it's just like, but that's the normal thing for cars, and with EVs, it's different. You just plug it in at home, or then if you're not at home, then what do you do then?
Yeah.
So there are some other questions. Yeah.
Yeah. And the thing I found myself as a recent EV owner is that all of the simple questions are somehow more complicated with an EV. People ask you questions that you find with the gas car, they inherently understand the context of how gas cars work. So there's no explanation needed whatsoever. And the same questions posed with an EV are more complex to answer because you have to fill in the backstory rather than, because there isn't actually a simple answer if you don't understand the backstory to your paradigm, your example of filling the car. Now at this point, I go home, I plug in the car, and it takes me, I think I've actually timed it just out of curiosity, it's 11 seconds. Versus getting gas. Okay, well, it only takes 2 or 3 minutes to get gas, but it actually doesn't take 2 or 3 minutes to get gas. The light goes off in the car, the low fuel tank, and you go, oh, I need to get gas. So everything from that point to the point that you get back on your road, the driving to the fuel station.
Like an addict. I need to get my fix. How do I do it? Do I do it before work? Do I do it after work? Like, no,
Yeah. And I'm about 4 months into this. And I've crossed the barrier where I don't even really look at the indicator anymore. I've reached a level of trust in that I plugged it in last night. Of course, I'm going to be able to get through my day or my week or whatever. So I've actually not ever really looking at the indicator to the same way that I would never really look at the indicator in a gas car until the little bing goes off and says, "Oh, I need fuel." The familiarity, the habit feeds into this as well because it's a new set of habits, a new set of skills. And all of the hereditary skills and habits and understandings that we drag along, they're just taken for granted, so it's difficult to explain. But then on the other side of it, there are new habits you learn, and you just adjust to them, and it becomes the new normal.
Well, how many oil changes have you done on your EV?
Well,
you don't need to.
I don't need to.
You know, kind of. How many differentials are broken on an EV? You don't need to because they're not on there. You have basically all-wheel drive because they're.
Yeah.
You get the battery. Kind of electric motors are intrinsically just like compact, and that's it. You don't need much lubricants.
Yeah.
We don't really think about it from that perspective
Yeah.
because you're just it. I sometimes put myself into kind of how would people think 100 years ago when everyone was like on horses and buggies. Like, you need your horses. How do I water my horses? Where do I feed them? It's just different.
Yep.
And nobody thinks about that nowadays.
Yep.
And it's whatever you're accustomed to.
Yeah, yeah. So, and to bring it back to, I guess, the fire aspect, we're accustomed to the dangers of internal combustion engine / gasoline. We've been using them for hundreds of years, literally at this point. And although there is a level of danger there, we understand the danger level is small because we've become familiar with it. So it's a level of familiarity. With electric cars, we have what looks to be a lower incidence of these incidents and accidents and fires and whatnot. But the difference is we're not familiar with it. So when these incidences do occur, they end up on the news. People end up talking about them. They end up, it's ingrained in culture now. The understanding is that, fires are dangerous with EVs, and it represents an outside risk that normally we wouldn't have undertaken with a gas car. It's just a different kind of risk. It's not the gas engine. The risk with the gas engine was always present. We just got familiar with it.
Well, and the risks are different. Yes, if you have a hydrogen buildup in a battery because there's some puncture or whatnot, you can have some explosion triggered through that, and that's not good. Technology kind of takes care in how it's built.
Yeah.
If you think about intrinsic danger of gasoline, it's a flammable liquid that's heavier than air. So if you puncture it, it flows out and it goes over large distance where people stand, kind of passengers, bystanders, emergency personnel, and then you have one spark, and it goes on fire and kind of whoosh.
Yeah.
And that's not really good. And on a hot day, you have gas pressure built up, then you have really kind of explosions there by simply, ideal gas law. Kind of get like pressure and gas and gases, and that combusts. We don't really think about it that way, kind of carcinogenic nature. That's not really good either. We don't really think about that too much. There's a lot of stuff to think about. Comes down to really, cost per kilometers. Kind of how much does that come in, and then the convenience.
Yeah.
You do have, though, you do have to be careful, though. And again, if you park your car at home, there are another potential sources. If there's a home fire, fire departments can extinguish the hose. But if you now have an electric vehicle, now you actually really have two incidents in one. Because again, once the battery goes, then it goes.
Yep.
And you can make that battery go if you have enough fire and enough stuff around.
Yep.
And that's the problem, and that's the intrinsic stuff. How often that happens, that we'll find out.
Yeah.
They're still safe, but we have to be careful about that.
Just to cycle back to something you said before, and we talked yesterday, and this kind of popped up in my mind. I'm told you're not supposed to put gas. You're not supposed to put water on a grease fire. Okay.
Oh yeah, absolutely not. Yes.
And you just mentioned gasoline. Gasoline, gravity drops, spreads, fumes spread out.
Yeah.
What about putting water on a gasoline fire? Is that recommended?
Well, first, you let the professionals and the experienced people. You let the fire departments do it. We're trained for that. All right. Grease fires, you do not add water, because the problem is when it's such a high temperature, you add water, the water vaporizes into gaseous water, steam, and that basically expands very rapidly, and now you have a large volume of tiny particles of grease, and that just burns like crazy. So you cannot do that. A burning car is not a grease fire.
Okay.
That's absolutely not. Also, it depends on how much water you have. If you go to a little fire with a little kind of water pistol, then that doesn't work. You need adequate water supply, and that's what we're trained for. You have several thousand liters of water. If you go on full tilt, that tank is empty in 4 or 5 minutes. We're working through that. If you can extinguish it before that time, that's it. Yeah. Otherwise, you need then hydrants, or you need, water shuttling and whatnot for those fires. So you douse it with a big bucket. So that's what we do. And water is it's safe. It's cheap. It's really good for thermodynamics and kind of sucking out the heat, lowering the temperature. It's actually the perfect tool for firefighting.
Mm-hmm. And that might be one of the issues, just thinking here now, that might be one of the issues that fire departments have to consider, because as you've said, with a traditional gasoline car, the volume of water you use is much less, theoretically, than an electric fire. So when you show up on site with the truck probably doesn't have enough water in it to extinguish the electric fire.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you need to get, how do you get extra fire there? It depends on the situation. If you have a gasoline stuff, if it's safe, you can just let it burn out. Just let it burn out. It's babysitting there.
Clear the area, make sure no one's around.
That's there. You can just let it do its thing. That's done in kind of certain type of situations. Kind of it's fuel controlled. You can't really do much.
Yeah.
Kind of.
But the optics on that probably aren't good. If you're a fireman, you're perceived to be Johnny on the spot with the hose, actively fighting this fire, versus sitting back and watching an electric car burn, knowing that it's going to burn. We'll just wait till it's done. But then everyone walking around, everyone watching it, why isn't the fire department doing something?
Well, it depends. Kind of. Every situation is different. So the incident commander will make those decisions. What is the best situation there? In fire service, we have active firefighting and we have passive or defensive, where you just make sure the fire doesn't spread somewhere else. And the decisions have to be made, life is first, then property, and then, environment. So we have to kind of take that. So obviously if there's life and risk, the approach to any fire is much, much different than if there is not life or property at risk. Mm. So that's, if someone is inside a car, it's not like, oh, let's wait until it burns out. No, like you go in and, drag that person out as best as you can and fast, because you don't have much time. If it's an unattended vehicle, then it's different. If it's an unattended vehicle in an empty parking lot because it just burned, that's different than it's in, kind of high crowded area. We just, those decisions have to be made very specific for very specific thing. And also what tools do you have, Yeah. Sometimes you don't have that much, so you have to be careful about that. It's balancing all that. That's and for everyone's safety.
Yeah. So every fire is different, and the context matters.
Oh, absolutely. And sometimes, a perfect approach to one fire with one kind of specific tactic might be an absolutely wrong approach to a different tactic. So you really have to be careful. You have to know the fire dynamics. What are the conditions? What are the wind conditions? Kind of it's different if it's on a windy day compared to kind of a sunny day or a rainy day. You have to make different decisions because the fire control is different. Now this is more for structure fire, but that's car fires are similar.
Theoretically applicable too.
Yeah, you have to. You have to go one by one, kind of what's going on, kind of what can you do, and that's above my pay grade. I'm there to put water on there or hook up this hose here, kind of. I'm not making those decisions. Yeah. Exposures. It's keeping things safe, securing the incident, make sure that nobody else gets hurt, and then whatever is downstream.
Yeah. This has been great. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
If you have any comments or anything you'd like to add, drop them down below. I'd like to get some of the input of our viewers in what they think about the occurrences of fires in electric vehicles and what they perceive as maybe some of the dangers are in owning an electric vehicle.